Hello, I'm Dane, and this is Dane Explains. You've probably heard of the word superconductor or superconducting, usually in the context of some sci-fi movie or series. Sometimes in the context of advanced technology, like the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, which uses a superconducting magnetic ring over 16 miles around. Well, what is a superconductor? How is it different from a regular conductor? And why are superconductors so much harder? Before I go into superconductors, let me quickly go over regular conductors. Materials are conductive because the electrons in the outer shells of their atoms are able to freely disassociate from the individual atoms, like you usually find in metals. This creates a conduit that electrons can freely pass through. This is a gross oversimplification, but you can imagine a wire a bit like a water pipe. The water you put on one end pushes the water that's on the other end out, almost like a super long Newton's cradle. Of course, electrons banging against each other isn't a perfect process, and it generates a little heat. It's this loss due to heat that reduces the material's conductivity. As you might imagine, superconductors allow the electrons to move without any resistance. Normally, for this to happen, the temperature of the material has to be really low. This is why equipment that takes advantage of superconductivity often requires liquid helium to keep the superconductors cold. Extremely high pressures can also achieve the same thing. The question is why? What about temperatures or high pressures cause certain materials to become superconductors? This goes back to particle physics. Particles are split into two groups, fermions and bosons. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's because the particles all have a property called spin. Fermions all have spins that are non-integer fractions. The electron, for instance, which is a fermion, has a spin of 1/2. Bosons all have spins that are integers. In the case of a photon, which is a boson, it's 0. Something you'll notice here is that fermions are the particles that make up matter, like what we're made out of. Bosons, on the other hand, are generally force carriers that transmit forces like the electromagnetic force. Yep, that's right, electrons don't transmit the electromagnetic force. Photons do. At any rate, the reason for this is something called the Pauli exclusion principle, which basically says that particles with non-integer spins cannot occupy the same space at the same time, while bosons don't have to obey that principle. Now, you can't hold a cup of light in your hand, but fermions can work together to create composite particles that are bosons. The most interesting example of this is helium, which is made of 2 protons and 2 neutrons, all of which have 1/2 spin. Add all those spins together and you get an integer spin, so boson. The bosonic nature of helium only becomes apparent at very low temperatures, where helium becomes something called Bose-Einstein condensate. Yes, Einstein is in that Einstein. Since the atoms aren't jostling each other around, the fermions that make them up are able to hide inside the nucleus of the atom, which acts as a bosonic particle. Now, if you've been paying attention, you may have noticed I missed something. I didn't say helium ion, I said helium atom. That means I ignored the fact that helium has 2 electrons. Everything still works out though, since electrons have a spin of 1/2, and that adds up to an integer. So the atom as a whole is still a boson. Now, something most people are probably aware of from chemistry is that electrons like to form pairs. That is why elements like hydrogen, which only has 1 electron, are rarely found outside of a molecule. Regular gaseous hydrogen, for instance, is 2 hydrogen atoms bound together, so that each electron can still be paired up with another. Helium is at an advantage because it has 2 electrons. It's also the reason why helium is the most stable element. It had no electrons to give or take because it already had 2, and they're in a pair. Now, this is where we go back to superconductivity. Under normal circumstances, electrons in a conductive material are moving around as individuals. However, if the temperature is low enough or the pressure high enough, the electrons will tend to form something called Cooper pairs inside the material. If almost all of them are paired up, then the pairs of electrons can start to act like bosons and move through the material together freely without bumping into other electrons. This is how materials become superconductors. I did, of course, hand-wave over many of the finer details, but those are stories for many more other videos. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please press the like button. Subscribe to my channel and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon. Link in the description. The more people support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.